Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Talking with Friends. This is actually our 1-year anniversary and just shy of the 20th anniversary of that show that we talked about back in episode 2 of Talking with Friends. So go check that out now. Available in the archives at fight.tv. That's right. We are here. We are officially on Fight. I'm Josh Shernoff, and I am joined by my friends. First, my brother, Mr. Fred Shernoff. Fred, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir.
And, of course, right below me, Calvin Tan. Calvin Tan, how are you?
Good to be down under.
Oh, my.
Down under what?
Right over to your left and my and down this way for me. He's Matt Mangol. He's got headphones. He's one mic shy of a full set, but Matt Mangol is here. And Matt, how are you?
I am swell. Thank you.
Great to hear that. It gets some ice.
Swell, not swollen.
Okay. So we're here. What's happened since the last episode? I grew a beard back.
Thank God.
Calvin and I went to the Hammerstein Ballroom.
Hammerstein or Hammerstein?
Hammerstein. And I got
We also
COVID.
went to,
Calvin got COVID.
Yeah, we also went to OVW.
We went to OVW.
Regular time.
Yeah.
Wait, Calvin
I just like to point out that there's no COVID on this side of the.
No.
I'm super
how's
immune
Virgil?
now.
Got my
Virgil,
COVID from
Calvin?
down under.
90 days, super immunity.
I feel like a year ago, I feel like when this started, none of us had lighting, but Calvin had
the most professional.
Calvin had the most professional setup. Maybe he had lighting and had like a good
Well, technology's advanced already.
good microphone.
It's been a
And
year.
Matt Mangol had a microphone and headphones and everything was great. And then
Well, I upgraded to Windows 11, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it.
Oh, boy.
probably Windows. So,
patch.
God, the only thing worse than that is if you're one of those people with a Android phone, the green bubble people.
That's not.
I saw
We're good.
someone was telling me
We're
about
good.
this.
We don't need to talk about the type
Someone
of
was
phones
telling
we
me
have.
about how
Unlike Apple phones.
Android is trying to sue Apple or something for the green bubble because
They're gonna come up with a workaround, I think.
because it's making
Apple's-
making people with a
They like the reach
people who don't
around.
have an iPhone sad.
They like the reach around. They don't like the workaround. So
Unfortunately, it forces all of us this a little behind the scenes that we have to communicate on Facebook Messenger to not lose our shit over having to talk to Mangol, which means we have to go all in with that evil empire that I'd rather not deal with at all.
you can text.
No, we can't.
No, we can't because all of a sudden, then I start getting like notifications like Fred likes, and then it's like a whole thing instead of just like a normal person where it just pops up with a like because Matt Mangol has turned everything green.
Well, why do you need? Why does Apple have to
try to send a
discriminate
GIF.
against other people?
Try to send a GIF, and everybody and Fred responds with an LOL. Calvin Tan with a well placed ha ha. Matt Mangol with a it didn't come through. So that's where
Hey,
That's
when
where
you're
we
over,
have to
you're
jump
over.
on to-
I don't need to promote myself. You know what I'm saying? It's okay.
Actually, I think
I'm
you do need to
happy,
promote
man.
yourself, and we're going to promote it right now because Talking with Friends is brought to you by Personal Training Unlocked. Go to personaltrainingunlocked.com. Download the free podcast Personal Training Unlocked, where Matt Mangol, you can hear him better than here. He sounds
Josh,
good. He looks
turn the
good
mic
on
up.
the videos. What's that? And it's a great way if you want to learn a little bit about physical fitness without having to.
We've been doing this for 20 years. Save yourself 20 years. Ask questions, get actual answers, and talk to a real person. And here's something: get results. So anyway,
personal training for any body.
damn right.
That's right. But anyway, so yeah, promoting yourself, not a bad thing, Matt Mangol. But today, let's talk about bad things. Let's talk about the state of professional wrestling.
Where do you begin?
So here's the thing. We've been, I mentioned we're coming up on the 20th anniversary. It's been over 20 years that we have been involved in the wrestling business. We're not going to go into our whole spiel because we have 9 episodes of this show available right now on Fight if you want to know all about what our history, where our education in pro wrestling comes from. We gave you a nice concise 12 plus hours of content to explain that. So now that I feel like we have established why our opinion matters, I think it's time to give our opinion. And one of the things I wanted to start with was, who here actually watched the Royal Rumble? Show of hands. All right. And here's my question. The Royal Rumble, is it not? Raise your hand if the Royal Rumble traditionally was your favorite pay-per-view of the year.
Long time ago.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are 4 people heavily involved in some way in the wrestling business. Whether people listening and watching this realize or not, we are all somehow involved in the wrestling business. Yet, only one of us watched the Royal Rumble. Now, I will also say, I watched the Royal Rumble while suffering from a bout of COVID, and I was bedridden and watched the Royal Rumble. But I will say, for the most part, I actually enjoyed it. So you guys, why didn't you watch the Royal Rumble?
I don't watch most WWE anymore because of the Peacock.
So you have an issue with the cock.
I used to have the network,
it's a
or
personal
share the network, and I do not have access to the cock anymore.
Wow. You don't want to use somebody else's cock?
Do what you got to do.
Okay.
That is my exact same
Blue
reason.
Chew.
I switched over to Verizon, and it doesn't come with Peacock. So there you go.
Cockless. It's nice.
So yeah, so you're cockless. Fred's just choosing to stay away from the cock. Mangol, what's your feeling on the cock? Peacock, of course, by the way.
Well,
the Peacock Network,
I'd embrace it,
for those
but
who aren't aware.
here's the thing.
Mm.
Some of us have to get up early and service our clients.
You can't be you can't be logging into the cock late at night when you got to get
What
up
I'm
early
saying
and
is-
service your clients.
So it's not worth my time, unfortunately. Back in the day when
But it's on
the
demand.
curtain, when the curtain was still up, all right, there's too much peeking behind the curtain here. We know there's
True.
back in the day, you watched because you're like, oh, what's going to happen? Now, see here, pre-social media, before it became really predominant, 2008 on, I would watch. Ever since then, not so much. It's too out there. Nothing that happens on I tried watching Raw. Okay. For the first time in 5 years. Yes, 5 years. I didn't make it past 30 seconds.
SmackDown's better than Raw now.
Well, okay. Well, that's like comparing a huge piece of shit to diarrhea. It's in the same category, but one's liquid, one's a solid. But here, if that's an
Fecal lessons with Matt Mangol.
it's an analogy people are used to. So my thing is this: the commentary is awful, because it's not commentary; it's scripted. It's too much like entertainment. It's too much like watching a play. If I want to watch a play, I'll watch a play. Anyway, that's my thing.
So would you say that the issue with wrestling nowadays, and right now we're talking specifically WWE, and then I want to talk a little bit about AEW.
It's worth treating them sort of separately, I think.
Yeah, because I think they are very separate in what they're
and their problems are very different.
I think they each have their own challenges, but yeah, there's definitely WWE right now. Now, it's worth noting that WWE made over $1 billion in profit this past year. So while we sit here, I always feel like that's a really important thing to mention when we sit here and go, WWE isn't nearly as good as it used to be. And it's like, yeah, well, we just made $1 billion, so we don't really care. So the question becomes, A, how did they make a bit? They
are going to sell.
They what?
They are going to sell.
They are going to sell. Okay, yeah. I couldn't see the whole thing there, Mangol, but
That's possible, yeah.
But
they're going to sell.
Maybe they're going to sell. I think eventually maybe they could sell. It feels that way. It seems like. So here's the thing: you made $1 billion. Well, how did you make $1 billion? One, you took Saudi blood money, right? Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, you fired an absorbent amount of people. That frees up your cash. So you're now, but realistically, all the people they fired when you look at $1 billion of profit, and I'm not telling tales out of school, right? It was $1 billion
It was
profit.
$1.095 billion.
That was
Of
profit or
profit.
revenue?
Profit or gross.
I think it was.
I assume
I
that's
think it was.
I think it was profit
because
right?
It was 900 and something 5 years ago, and it slowly moved up to that.
So the
they're
thing is, when
improving
you
their
look
bottom
at all the
line so that
people,
they can sell for a higher price. I mean,
well, if you look at all the people that they released, like a lot of them be like, well, they're making profit because they released so many people. Listen, that's nothing. Like, let's
That's
say
only part of
every
it.
single person that they released was making $1 million a year, which we know as a whole was not even remotely close to that.
Right.
I mean, that still wouldn't even scratch the surface. You keep all of them employed, and this is a company that still made 900, like $900+ million. So it's so you're really
I think
talking about a
there's-
difference
there's-
between not 980 million or
Yeah,
$1
but
billion.
the problem is not the lack of the problem is not the lack of talent, right? Because you can have 100 really good wrestlers, really good personalities, and you can have 50 of them, but that's not the problem with the company that we don't like about it, right?
Right. So the
It's
thing that
whether
we're
you have Bray Wyatt or whether you have someone else,
Mhm.
the problem is not the lack of talent; it's the presentation of the talent, right?
And so that comes into that whole conversation of what are we looking at? Are we looking at the WWE? Like, when we don't like watching the WWE product, no one can argue. Here's the thing. You can't argue the talent. You can't argue them because there's a reason why you could look, for instance, Keith Lee, right? Horribly used. Killer Cross, terribly used once he got up to the main roster. Both these guys did an amazing job in NXT, horrible on the main roster. They get released, and Killer Cross, I just did that show with him at WrestlePro, but he's, bound to show up somewhere on a larger scale again and is going to be a huge success wherever he is. Keith Lee, first night in the door at AEW, everybody's going crazy, and he's Keith Lee, and he showed off what makes him special. Although I personally did find him to be a little slow in the ring, but I think maybe it's just kind of getting used to the slower pace, which is not something you see as much in AEW. But I look at it and I say, it's not the talent. The talent is there. It is what Calvin said, the presentation. I agree completely in that regard. But
and some of the talent behind the scenes, not the talent, but the people that produce the talent.
Yes,
not all the producers, but just
and some of the producers,
whoever's writing the stuff.
Yeah,
awful.
And then you have to wonder, like, okay, is it awful?
It doesn't mean that the writing is awful.
Well, what's chosen to go on.
It's more of the writing is not right for the talent that you're writing it for.
And what's chosen to go forward and what's not, you wonder what's not. And if that would actually be good. Whoever's choosing certain things.
Mangol brings up a good point. Like, I would love to know.
What are they turning down? Like what?
Right.
Ideas?
I'd love to know why they're going with something. Instead of us just sitting here going, oh, God, that's horrible. What a terrible segment. Instead, I wish you could sit down with a Bruce Pritchard. And I guess, hey, stay tuned for something to wrestle 10 years from now when he explains everything. But I wish you could sit down and have Vince McMahon or Bruce Pritchard or somebody there explain, really explain. I don't mean like we caught you in an interview and asked you a question, so you gave some political answer, what you think is going to get you, acceptable enough, but you don't give the full answer. I would love to know when we watch a segment, we go, oh my God, that was so bad. I'd love to sit down and have that opportunity, and I'll never have that opportunity, but I would love to be able to sit down with, let's say, a Vince McMahon or a Bruce Pritchard and say, okay, you see that over there, what we just watched. Here's why I don't think that was good. Okay? Here's what I think was good. Here's what I think wasn't good. Why did you do this that was objectively bad on paper and in practice, in execution? Why did you do this? Because they're not out there. You can't have the same argument where you go, all they care about is making themselves as profitable as possible to sell. But at the same time, they're intentionally just creating this negative air around their company. It can't be they are not wasting their time. I don't believe they're wasting their time sitting there going, this will suck. Why don't we do that?
I don't think that they intend to, that they think it sucks and they're going to throw it out there anyway. But I think the perception is that there is a lot of conflict of on almost every level of different sides of anything that you could bring up. So you're talking about like whether or not they're going to sell. So you have a company that is taking money from the Saudis, and then it's the same company that now they haven't confirmed this or anything, but the conversations are always they're trying to cozy up to Disney,
Right?
For
Sure.
Does that make any sense? Does that sound like a company that's wholeheartedly pursuing a mission? When they're doing both things that are not really compatible, and I think on almost every level, whether it's the thing I always harp on that the as looking toward the next generation of wrestling fans, and whether it's they're sort of a family friendly product, but they're sort of not. They're sort of an entertainment, a package polished entertainment thing that is more movie than sport. But then they also try to tell us that the days of silly gimmicks and whatever that's in the past, and these are real athletes and whatever. They're trying both sides of every point of it, and I don't know.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And then you look at NXT, as I said on this past month's, onto the January episode I should call it the award-winning So Says Shernoff, as the award-winning best host of the year, in general. It says very specifically the best host in general of everyone. That's anyone on the internet. So anyway, I don't have my award yet, though, so my Shernie will have to do for now. But as I said in there, NXT 2.0 looks like it looks like they sat down and they said, make a list of all the things that our main roster shows were doing wrong that NXT was getting right, and then let's do all of those in NXT 2.0. And let's eliminate all of those things that everybody was in agreement they were doing right. And so the question becomes...
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, the question becomes, why? What? Because, again, like you're saying, it's not like they turned around and said, too much blood, too much foul language, we got to bring it to this. There is no, like you said, what are they... This mission. There is no mission. It doesn't make any sense. There was, like, when they changed NXT to NXT 2.0, we can all look at the tangible things that they eliminated, but what we can't really figure out is why. Why?
I think it's part of their, insofar as they have some mission, and I think they do. I don't know if they pursue it wholeheartedly the way they should, whatever that mission is, but I think it factors into what's happening with the talent cuts and the various things they've done. But I think that as they pursue the mission and they're trying to define it factors into how they're recruiting talent, and they've sort of pivoted on that.
Yeah.
I think it factors in if you look at the press release that they put out about the women's match on AEW, I believe.
Yes. It was also covered in this month's award-winning So Says Shernoff. So
I think if you look at that and why are they doing all these things, I think that they're trying to say, and I don't know where this came from, but that they're saying our product is not that product. Our fan base is not that fan base. I don't know if they know who their fan base is, but it's very easy to buy into the hype on the internet and say, okay, they hacked NXT apart because Vince McMahon was jealous that Triple H was doing a better job. I don't know. But what I do think is happening is that NXT had the internet fans, the kind of fans who like AEW and things like that, were really impressed with it for many years. And I think they're now saying, that's not our audience. We give those people over to AEW. That's not who we're for. And I just don't quite know who they are for, but I feel like I'm seeing the signs of something like that.
Well, here's the thing. They probably changed it so that eventually they go back and then they get more viewers because they went back. Exactly. And here's the other thing.
Bring back the thing you always love.
How many years has Triple H been fighting Vince? for NXT, like for doing things the way he wants to on NXT, probably because Vince is an alpha male. He's you can't tell me he sits down across from them at dinner at some point and he's not going to give his 2 cents on certain things. Like, I'm just saying, it's Triple H is not. Hopefully, he's doing a lot better. I think Vince is still trying to have too much input, and he can't.
Well, that's probably true. But
delegate
you think that NXT 2.0 is in some part Vince intentionally trying to sabotage what Triple H built?
But why? Realistically, why?
I don't.
Well, the question is, what was his measure for NXT success? Like, what did he consider successful for NXT? Right? Because if he's just looking at bottom line numbers, maybe he's looking at what the original NXT was, and this was a failure. It did.
Well, maybe when it went up. Do you think it's because when it went up against AEW and it lost continuously in the ratings?
Yes,
could be.
And they said, and their answer to it, well, because look, in a lot of ways, you can look at it and say NXT was catering to that audience that AEW absorbed, right? But the difference is AEW, unlike NXT, is doing it in arenas and doing it with a huge feel, with big name people like a Moxley, like a Jericho, Sting, all these different people, whereas NXT was still kind of doing that. It's that little engine that could, but he didn't have the big name guys, which they never wanted to lose the big name guys and bring them down to NXT. And NXT is in this small venue. And of course, originally it was Full Sail, which was this great feeling. And then it became, they realized they could keep it in well, of course, COVID, but then now they have it in this little NXT arena thing or whatever the hell it is, the Capital One Wrestling or I don't know, whatever. So they now have it like that, which makes me say, okay, so you're going to say, well, NXT is for those people. AEW is also for these people. Well, dude, AEW is doing it way better. So now they're looking at it going, well, great. Then we're just going to make it completely different. But it's horrible.
Well, here's another thought. All right. Now, just based on what's in front of us, obviously we don't know too much behind the scenes, but ECW. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ran in small arenas, a lot of buzz, a lot of intensity, different product. Okay. One Night Stand originally. Okay. Small comparative to what they usually run. Yeah, huge. Sure. The intensity. You watch any of the entrances, Sandman, RVD. The energy in there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So DVD sales, all that stuff. Vince liked that money, potential profits, but a product that had to stay in a smaller arena.
Yes.
Otherwise, you lose that because it gets drowned out. But look what happened with ECW.
Yep.
Very similar to what's happening to NXT. Okay, I'm just saying. Now, what's the common denominator there? Unfortunately, Vince. I don't know if he learned his lesson.
And that's the thing. Is it? I don't know. Do we have to subscribe to the internet? Vince McMahon is this evil. He'll ruin anything that we internet fans like.
I think the intentions are there, but who? Bruce said it himself in many podcasts. You can come to Vince with an idea. You can have a suggestion on an idea he had.
Right.
But if he's committed to it, you go with it. You run the play.
And look,
he doesn't have anybody who is. He doesn't have anybody, even Bruce. I don't blame him. The guy's making money. He's doing fine. He's doing a good job. But no one can go, look, Vince, this ain't going to work. You can't do it. You're not going to.
That might be true, but I don't know if the failure of the ECW revival was just due.
No, it was oversaturation with other talent versus giving it. You take.
Well, here was my
feeling
on EC. This was what I think was the issue with ECW, with the WWE ECW. I think at the core of it, there were two main issues. Number one, you were resurrecting a brand that had been romanticized for a specific style, a specific time period.
Yes.
And you were trying to now put it in a different time, and you were trying to
do it on a bigger
say,
scale.
hey, you know that thing you love? You know that? I'll give you it would be like this. Like, we all love Ghostbusters, right? The reason that the new movie Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I personally think was incredible, I thought it was great. But could you imagine if instead it was a reboot telling the same story with very similar jokes, and it took place in the 80s, and it was the whole story just rebooted with new actors? You'd be like, this isn't right. Like, I don't want this. And in a lot of ways, WWECW, One Night Stand, was a huge success, and there was all that nostalgia. And now you're going, hey guys, check out, welcome back to ECW and all the nostalgia. Here comes Mike Knox. Here's CM Punk. We know you love him, but he's not ECW. Here's Kelly dancing for a while. Right. Don't worry, guys.
Yeah,
you're a little worried? Big
ECW.
Show's going to show up.
No, it wasn't.
Hey, here's Lashley. So that's the thing. So you've taken something and you're calling it the same thing, but it's never going, it's not the same.
Well, I think they were never going to be able to trade on the stars of the past for a number of reasons. They were older. Many of them were never that good if exposed on the national level. But I think Punk was a great example because of his Ring of Honor cred. And in many ways, that's kind of what NXT 1.0 became, was more ECW,
which technically
done right.
was NXT 2.0.
Yes.
Right. Because 1.0 was like Seth Rollins and Big E being champions. And then 2.0 was once the network started, back when when Neville beat Bo Dallas for the title.
And what was
that
Nexus?
Was 2.0.
Was that like an alpha or a beta?
Nexus
or something?
Was something you were either with us or
that was a test
or you were
run of
Nexus or with us or against us. I don't know.
You remember the name of NXT,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Yes. Mm-hmm. That was NXT 1.0, was the NXT show that Wade Barrett won the first season. Then there was NXT 2.0, which was when when FCW became NXT, and that was Seth Rollins and Big E. Then there was NXT 3.0, which was when they first had that debut show on the WWE Network, when that started a number of years ago, when they had the ladder match between Bo Dallas and whatever. Then some could argue that they then moved on to the USA Network, thus beginning NXT 4.0. So now 4.0. So now this new version, NXT 2.0, could easily be argued that it is the five-time NXT presentation.
So it's basically the Google Chrome of wrestling promotions. Every time you turn it on, it updates to something new.
So the one other thing that
ECW would have been successful had they let Paul Heyman run it.
Yes and no. A lot of people say
and if they treated
that Paul Heyman didn't.
Sorry.
No. I'm saying a lot of people said that Paul Heyman could do a certain amount with running it, but then there was only so much he could do because
this is my argument about that, is that Paul Heyman, what was great about ECW was Paul's ability to emphasize strengths and mask weakness, and everything having to do with the format of the show. And again, you have a point about the time period changing, and maybe that grungy 90s kind of feel wouldn't work so well. But Paul Heyman was involved in a lot of the creative with the early days of WWE ECW, but he was basically trying to book a watered down SmackDown, with a pseudo extreme vibe to it. I think that if you gave him the chance to put on the old style ECW show, but you've got your CM Punk and whatever, and a new breed of guys,
in a smaller setting, which goes back to what Mangol was saying, which was you put it in an arena. Well, no, you put it in an arena and you aired it after SmackDown tapings. Yeah. So not only do you have a deflated audience because they're exhausted because they just watched SmackDown, But now you're showing an audience which is not an ECW audience to begin with. They're not into that style because they came for SmackDown. And now you're saying to them, hey, you know the glitzy, glamorous, big show that we just did with all the pyro and all the everything and all the lights and all these major stars that you love? Well, don't go anywhere yet because we're about to show you Mike Knox and another guy you don't know.
Well,
and we're going to turn the lights really dim.
Right.
And we're going to put a curtain over the really nice entranceway and have a tiny one that comes out of the crowd. It didn't... That was another issue. And I was saying there was the two parts. The second part of it was they took ECW and tried to make it a third brand of WWE.
Right.
And the whole thing is WWE and ECW were different. You can't have ECW. So now you don't have the same roster. You're not, all it was ECW. It was just the three letters. And that was it. And that's why that failed miserably.
They didn't learn from WCW, right?
No.
Because they had a chance of completely separating WCW and running it as a separate company, and that would have.
Well, you would have had Raw and you would have had WCW. Like you would have had.
Well, actually, they always say when they talk about it, they say they would have had SmackDown and they would have had, and Raw would have become WCW, like Nitro, which made no sense to me, except for the fact that SmackDown was on network television.
Well,
but
the ECW thing, one last thing. They should have stayed in the Northeast and treated it like a territory for a number of years. And then you have that. So you do that. And then you get the people to tune in. They're watching the thing with the intensity, the passion, and you still mix it like you did the old shows.
Well, man, WWE is going to have none of that. They just cut Matt Mangol's feed. It's the pipe bomb. It's the pipe bomb all over again. Man, here he comes back. Man, no, that was Kevin Dunn. Kevin Dunn was told McMahon was on the headset. Cut his mic, damn it, cut his mic.
Bugs Bunny. Listen, you hear me?
Oh, you know what? Who it was? Seriously though, I think it was Rob Dimension.
Hey. Well, hold on. But was it the last thing? So what I was going to say was, you do that territory thing. You mix the show. Like you did the old school stuff, but the commercials in there could be for WWE merch. They could be for whatever, other tapings, whatever it is, for just for ECW. And then eventually you have one pay-per-view or two pay-per-views a year for just ECW. And then you go to Florida, like Daytona Beach, like they used to do. You kind of keep the same circuit and you build that for a couple of years. Then you start to pan out towards the West. Then they would have been successful.
Because what they did was they were trying to play, they were like, we're going to go to all the nostalgia. But then they're like, and we'll present it to everyone. All these people who don't have nostalgia for it, because WWE obviously has a large thing. So if you don't know, it's like a lot of different things. Like whether if it's like some food that really wasn't all that great, but it was the thing we all ate in the 90s. Well, we're going to love it because it's going to take us back to a time.
Yeah, like sometimes you want that like greasy takeout food, right? Like it just like hits a spot, right? And
but if you're someone who never had that as a kid, you don't get the joy of it. You're kind of like, I've never eaten something like this. This is garbage.
I want to, since we're talking about the state of wrestling, and this I think kind of crosses into AEW and everything else going on, but I've been listening recently to the Something to Wrestle ECW mega episode where they recapped a lot of those discussions, which just kind of put a lot of the ECW stuff in my mind. And I don't remember which episode it actually was, but at one point, Conrad asked Bruce, I think something about like the legacy of ECW, and do you feel that in some ways do you agree that it in some ways negatively impacted the business? And he kind of, at first he was a little reluctant, but he kind of did acknowledge it in some ways that, and he was focusing more on, as things got more extreme and the other companies had to match that, it led to more concussions and more, things like that. But it made me think that some of the problem in the business today that has to do with a lot of the kind of things that make Jim Cornette very upset. And, a lot of the flippy floppy, the over, getting up from moves that should have just killed somebody and just nothing matters anymore. I think a lot of that does rest at the feet of ECW. I think that they paved the way for something that I remember as a high school kid watching that and getting into it and thought it was so great and so different that it started to change my perception of WWF. That I would watch that and go, man, nobody even does a springboard. No one ever goes off the middle rope. And then so amazed when they brought like, Sabu in to wrestle, and like you're seeing things happen the way I started to believe it should be. This is the next evolution of wrestling. And I'm so excited to see that. And gradually ECW started moving things in a direction, the style of wrestling they were bringing from Mexico and Japan and everything, that they pushed it out there. And I think in some ways they are indirectly, if anything, responsible for desensitizing the wrestling audience to where we are today, where we've seen it all and done it all.
And that's, I was talking to my good friend Hugo Savinovich the other week.
Sure.
And I asked him, because they're talking about, the next phase of AAA. And I said, once upon a time in like the 90s, people were talking about like, man, all this new stuff that we're seeing in wrestling has been going on for decades in Mexico.
Right.
And I said to him, so meanwhile, we've now adopted that style, almost, solely that style in AEW. I said, what's next for AAA? Like, what is their next thing? Because they were doing the stuff beforehand. So what are they doing now? And it was very interesting what his answer was. And to paraphrase, pretty much what he said was, AAA is now going to try to have more characters. They're going to have more story. They are basically now looking at what American wrestling was. Sure. And they're now saying, okay, great. You guys took all this flippy, no selling stuff that we were doing. Well, now where do we go from here? I guess we'll go to all that stuff you guys used to do and bring that back. And I thought that was so interesting.
That is.
We always talk about the cyclical nature of wrestling, but how you have, eventually you're going to get to a point where it's just too much of one thing and you've got to pivot to something else. But that brings us all back to what we were originally talking about with WWE, which, I don't get what they're trying to be, because I almost want to say to them, listen, you don't want to be a professional wrestling company. You don't want to be pro wrestling. You don't like pro wrestling. Then just go do something else. Then just go make movies. Go do something. Like,
well, they
why
tried a
are
little bit
you
with the WrestleMania, like what, a year or two ago, with the cinematic stuff, which you can't do all the time. I understand that,
no.
But it was the first time that I saw a glimmer of what wrestling could be. And I think one of the other things, and this really, everybody does this, but the format of the television show, I think, has become very stale. I'm not saying it hasn't evolved at all over time, but they hit on a formula. I mean, we're old enough to have been wrestling fans through, we came in, a lot of us at the tail end of when Vince crushed the territories and how those syndications started coming out, and the Saturday morning wrestling and primetime wrestling, and how that evolved into Monday Night Raw and everything. And then around the Attitude Era between WWF and WCW, they hit on something that it would seem, and everything from the soap opera for men kind of thing that they used to call it, the backstage segments, the like, it's all happening, that intensity of the immediacy of what's going on backstage, the format of the shows themselves, to the constant use of authority figures in the ring in some capacity, or in front of the camera, I should say. It almost feels like somewhere along the line, and I'm not saying we did similar things with TWF and all. I think at some point it's almost like every wrestling promotion came to a secret agreement that we've decided that this is the ultimate evolution of the wrestling as entertainment. That what they figured out in the Attitude Era. Obviously, technology has improved, and there's more LED screens, and there's better cameras and all that. But that this drama production, this late night thing, this is what wrestling was always aspiring to be, and we have nowhere to go from here. And until we saw those cinematic matches, I hadn't seen anything in 20 years that was innovative in terms of the presentation of the product.
I think that's really interesting. I think, you've also talked a lot about how the one thing missing in the wrestling space right now is a mainstream show for kids.
Yes.
Because WWE is not for kids. It's not. I don't care what they claim. It reminds me of my broadcast partner Dave Sturgio over at WrestlePro, as somebody did something went a little too violent, and he goes, "This is a kid's show, God damn it!" And I said, "A kid's show, God damn it!" You said
that's up with Murad, FNS and SNS.
Yeah, but my point was, and I just thought it was great when he crossed himself up. But I feel like a lot of the time, like WWE, it's like, we're a kid show. Let's do a storyline where that person's secretly sleeping with that one's wife. And you're like, I'm sorry. Like, is this supposed to be something that my 6-year-old's relating to? Or is it like, and that's where I look and I go, choose who you want to be and stop screwing it up so badly. Because when I saw the new logo for NXT, the NXT 2.0, I can't even say this shit right now. That's a biz thing. But anyway, when I saw the NXT 2.0, the new logo, I remember I was at the Chase with Calvin Tan when that first was like breaking news. Here's this new logo. And we saw it and we're like, that's really uninspired. That's not really a good looking logo. And then we saw all the paint splashes and people in the internet like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I thought for a brief moment, wait a minute. This looks like a Saturday morning cartoon thing. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this might be, and I think I texted you, Fred, because I'm like, Fred, it's, like that, the GIF they always put out there from The Office, with the, it's happening, right.
And that's how many conversations have we had that I can't watch the product with my son, who I would love to get into wrestling. That's my biggest issue, is that it is not, a lot of it is just not for me. The stuff that I grew up loving about WWF is targeted towards kids. In some ways, it's silly from the perspective of an adult, and I accept that. And I've said that to you, Josh.
But you also loved comic books.
Yes, I've equated
it's that audience.
But I've equated it to like Power Rangers. I've often said, and like that a show that's still on the air. I don't watch Power Rangers because it's not for me anymore. It was for me when I was a kid, and I'm okay with that. And I would like to see a wrestling promotion that caters to a young audience that's going to buy all the merchandise and do all that, and understand that it's not for me, but it is for my son, and I can bring him as the parent and live vicariously the way parents do, you
you can watch your kid enjoy this in a way that you used to, and that's what I thought. Going back to the whole, I've had this feeling for a while of like Raw, SmackDown, NXT. And this is what I thought they should have done with ECW. But to me, I thought when they had ECW, I thought we can't do that violent, in the same way. But I thought, you know what? Raw. Make Raw, which goes until 11 o'clock at night. Why the hell is that a kid's show? 11 o'clock at night. Make Raw back to what it was in the Attitude Era. And in a different way, because it's a different time. But make it edgier. Make that be the one where if you want to have scantily clad women, if you want to whatever. And then I thought, don't go with the extreme hardcore side of ECW. Go with the Guerrero Malenko or the Rey Mysterio Psychosis style and make the new ECW brand your wrestlers wrestling brand. Which pretty much is what NXT eventually became. Yes. It's the Ring of Honor. It's the AEW. It's that style, right? And then let SmackDown be your kids show, was what I was kind of like looking at. But then I thought to myself in this latest go around, why can't you cater to everybody in this regard? If you want to change NXT, well, then I thought NXT was going to become the kids show. Because I've always said you're going to have 3 brands. It should go like this. There should be one, which is your a little bit more like your WWF hardcore. Because I don't believe there's a what?
Attitude Era type hardcore. You're
Right,
saying?
because what I'm saying is I don't believe there is a mainstream place for a GCW. You know, and don't get me wrong, we've had a great time at GCW. They do an incredible business. They have an incredibly passionate fan base, and they're a great company. But they are what they are. Will they get bigger? Yeah, I think they will get bigger than what they are. Will they get WWE size? Absolutely not. It's impossible, because we saw this with ECW. As ECW, and I talked to Brett Lauderdale about this on a Fight and Focus, which you can watch right now here on Fight. Well, I talked to Brett about it, and I asked him, I said, are you concerned that there's a ceiling like there was when ECW went to TNN? And his feeling was no, because they're more than just the deathmatch stuff. They can be more.
Well, I must say that their latest event that we were a part of at the Hammerstein Ballroom, that didn't have any light tubes or any of that deathmatch stuff.
And I think
they put on a great show.
And I think they proved
a fantastic show.
And I think they proved. So when I say they couldn't get as big as WWE or something like that, I should first of all never say never. But secondly, what I mean to say is they could never do it with the light bulbs, with you can't get that big because you won't get the sponsorship. You won't get it, and it is what it is. But going back to it, I think WWE should have their Attitude Era show, their Attitude show, which is Raw. I mean, the names in it should be that feeling of, you know, I still think that, you know, if you want to have I think SmackDown should be your wrestling show. It should be it should be the show that is just like the best of the best are there, you know, of pure wrestlers, and have your characters and have your stuff, but let that be much more of like we're really focused on we're going to see amazing matches. And then NXT should have become NXT next, the next generation. It should have been the kids.
Yeah, NXT should be next generation, but for the kids, just create a new brand, or a new show, not new brand, new show.
And then guess what happens?
WWE superstars, and that should be your Saturday morning.
Because guess what happens with them?
Good wrestlers that could be those characters, like maybe ASH, right? Would be perfect for that.
What about Braun Breaker or whatever his name is, right? Rick Steiner's kid.
Yeah.
You look at him, that guy could be an over-the-top cartoon superhero type character. And then 5 years from now, when they're going to say this dude's ready to be like a big time, well, guess what? The 10-year-old that was loving him in NXT is now 15 and doesn't want to watch the more kid-oriented, silly stuff. But guess what? We've now moved Braun Breaker up to, is that his name? I feel like I'm saying it wrong, but
that sounds right.
All right. But anyway, we're now moving him up to SmackDown or up to Raw,
so
where we're looking at it going like, come with them.
You
don't have to worry about these NXT ones.
Right. You're creating a feeder system for your fans in a way that grow with we have something for you at each stage of your fandom.
Yeah.
And I think that has been missing for so long. And what's crazy is, I don't know if it's still the case, but for a very long time, beyond what I had thought was actually going on, they were continuing to run these sort of syndicated, like cleaned up to get past the censors for kids, repackagings of Raw and SmackDown.
Raw AM or whatever. Yeah.
Different things. Yeah. There's still, I think that some markets are still like a Superstars or something like that. They have things, but they're all just watered down repackagings of the primetime events. And it's been so long since anyone has taken the time to actually craft something that is meant to fit in between cartoons, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that goes to, you know, and as we start to wind down the episode here, because I am going to keep us to a time limit, because I feel like now that we're not telling stories, but we're having a debate, we could go for hours on this stuff. Yeah. And we will. We'll go on the next episode.
We haven't gotten to AEW. That's for next time, I guess.
And that's what I want to say. Yeah, maybe next time I think that's probably a good thing that we can do. Maybe next time we'll talk about what's right and what's wrong with AEW. So let's talk about, in fairness here, what's right about WWE? What are they getting right? Because it is easy to say things suck. Like, oh, it sucks.
We're talking what are they getting right in terms of being entertaining? Because we pointed out they're making money.
Right. So we know they're doing that right. Morally, maybe not right, but but we know they're doing right.
When
They- I-
they let some of these
what it is.
guys, when they let some of these guys ad lib, right, and be their character and embody their character, like former Brock Lesnar, has been amazing.
Yeah.
Right. They
Roman
let Paul
Reigns.
Heyman go, Roman Reigns
Has been excellent.
The one has been excellent. Like those segments have been amazing. Those segments have been entertaining, and you don't get that feeling of bad acting when you're watching any of those guys. Whether they're on the mic or in the ring, stuff like that. Like
There was at the Royal Rumble, there was Roman Reigns or something. It was him and Seth Rollins, which I love Seth Rollins' new character as well. And I even loved, and this was where I really got to give props to him, to mess with Roman Reigns. He came out to the Shield music, dressed as Shield Seth Rollins, came through the crowd, but was the new Seth Rollins dressed as the old Seth Rollins. He was still very much this same kind of lost his mind a little bit character while dressing like the old one. Like I thought it was really well done. But there was, and forgive me if I'm mixing it up because I was kind of in I was having, it could have been just a fever dream during my COVID, but he was choking out Seth Rollins, and I believe it was like, maybe they went for like a disqualification or whatever, but there was one thing that Roman Reigns did was amazing when they're like, break the hold, and he's choking him, and he's like, he won't let me stop. He won't let me let go. He won't let me break the hold. And it's like the man was like, that was it. Like Roman Reigns plays this in a way where he's like, I don't want to do this to him. I don't have no choice. He won't let me stop. And there was a depth to that, to what he was saying in his delivery, and the kind of like the fact that he said something so implicit as opposed to explicit, right? The fact that he said something so that made you go like, he won't let me, and go like, oh, there's like psychological layers to what he's saying right there. I was just like, wow, that's cool. That's fun. That's entertaining. And that is something they're doing well. And I think I almost look at it and I go like, they're victims of their own success, in the sense that when the storybooks are written, no one is going to remember this generation of because I mean, it's been going on for well over a decade of things being kind of weak. So there's going to be a generation where you look at the WWE and you do not remember it you do not remember it as the best pro wrestling in the world. You remember it as the company that puts on wrestling shows that made the most money, but you don't remember it as the best wrestling. And that's a shame, because there's so much damn good talent, and when given an opportunity,
right? But one could argue, when you go back to the era that we grew up in the 1980s, and Hulk Hogan was running wild, and there were people who would say that WWF, for all that was the company that was making the most money, but was sure as hell not the company with the best wrestling. And did that matter?
That's a really great point. That's a really great point. Does it matter? Because at the same time, if you go to Raw or SmackDown, I remember when Calvin and I a couple of years ago for So Says Shernoff, we did a thing where we were like interviewing fans outside of it, and I remember like this little kid who was just like, I watch it on my Xbox. And he's like, I that's where he gets like the network. He's like, and I watch Monday Night Raw every Monday. I watch it, and all that. And it was his first live show. This kid, try telling that kid that the show's not entertaining.
Right.
And my only issue, my only gripe, was that I was watching the show he was watching, and I was thinking to myself, God, I don't want my kids watching this.
That's my point. That's
the problem.
That's why I believe that the children are our future.
I mean, teach them well and let them lead the way. That's what I've always said.
Randy Watson. No, it's from Coming to America. That's what he's singing.
Yes, but it's like, okay. Anyway,
I know.
The kids, but that's my point. That's my point exactly. Is that the kids see
It
it
looks so
differently.
good, I'm gonna sop it up with a biscuit.
They don't think it's crappy. So you target at least one of your brands for these kids. You solve all your problems. It doesn't. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
Sexual That's from
I think that we've reached the point of the show where Mangol starts quoting 80s movies.
you know what I'm talking about.
No, but I to me, I look at it and I think Calvin made great points of like some of the stuff that they are doing right. That is really entertaining. There are some things that WWE is you're always going to look at here and go like, man, they just will always do that better than anybody else. Some of their video packages, some of their I mean, they just do amazing work. But I just look at them and I look at it in the sense of like if you were watching a movie and you go, God, that movie was so good, but why did they do this part? This would have been such an incredible film if not for that. What was that scene? Jesus Christ, like that was horrible. And that's how I feel sometimes when I watch WWE and I go, okay, that was good. That was a really great match. That was really entertaining. Oh, well, why are they doing this? Why does this have to be there? Why does Nia Jax have to be there? Which thankfully she's not anymore.
Not, but like actually,
it's just horrible.
Tie this back into the cinematic matches, which I again can't do it all the time. I think the Cena Bray Wyatt thing was amazing. That was my favorite by far, and that was a very special circumstance with very special talent, drawing on a history and everything. But the Undertaker AJ Styles match, I think, goes to your point, Josh, that you and I talked about. There was a story there that was meant to be Undertaker's send-off, and he's sort of kind of out of gimmick, and he's called back to defend his wife's honor, and he's fighting AJ, and he's doing the whole thing, and then he gets thrown into the grave, and he disappears, and he comes out from behind AJ Styles.
Which has become a great meme that people use now.
And that's one of those moments where you're like,
that's where
this was so well done. And if you had him appear in the old garb, even if it wasn't really the old one, they remade it for him or whatever, and he appears and he's the real dead man one last time because he had to call him that because that's what he got to. Then you would have told a complete story, and that would have been perfect.
98%.
And that
98%. Yeah.
But that's the thing. That is honestly, Fred, that's probably, if you ever needed to give an example of what we're discussing of what WWE does wrong, that's the example. Because you want to complete his story, that's his story. He got thrown in, he got buried, he used his magic, if we're talking about in canon here, right?
He did.
He used his magic, his Undertaker magic, to come out of that grave that AJ Styles just buried him in to show up behind him, right? That was the moment. He should have come out as the dead man, totally made up with the old school gray gloves for one final moment. He is that. He grabs him, he tombstones him, he falls into the grave, he buries him, and then he can just walk off with the fire, like walk over there and raise his hands up, let the fire go and walk off. He didn't need to ride off into the sunset on his motorcycle, because what we're showing you is at the end, or even if you wanted that scene of him riding off on the motorcycle, then have him return to that, like, let that spirit ascend
You've done it
out.
Now?
No, let the No, not that. What I'm saying is, in that moment, while we have suspended disbelief in such an incredible way in that moment, allow him to get down on his knee, do the Shakespeare, as Bruce Pritchard calls it, and use your special effects and have the Undertaker with the gray glove gimmick ascend like a spirit out of Mark Calloway and let it disappear up to the ceiling, as Mark Calloway then, back in the biker Undertaker look, puts the hand down, stands up, adjusts his vest, looks forward, steps onto his motorcycle, throws up the hand, boom, there's your fire, and rides off into the sunset. And you just told everybody the Undertaker has finally ascended The Undertaker, that character you've always wanted, he came back for 5 minutes, and Mark Calloway can retire because he has finally let that demon loose. He is finally, the demon that he carried with him of the dead man has finally been released and is gone.
So what?
I just gave myself chills.
Yeah, I mean, it's
telling a story that would have made something that was so great would have just been that final piece of the puzzle.
So the question is, why? What happens that makes them get so close? Even when they hit on a good idea, they almost always miss a step, and it makes it less than it could have been.
Is it the bubble? Is it the wrestling bubble? Had I been called in, had I gotten a phone call from Bruce Pritchard and said, Josh, I'm a huge fan of your show.
You have been a wrestling fan since the beginning of the Undertaker days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know whoever's writing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, the Undertaker has not been the dead man for as long as he's been.
So that's true. But there's also the fact that, let's say, who's working closely with this? Let's say it's Bruce Pritchard and Vince McMahon. Two people who are closest professionally and personally to Mark Calloway, the actual person. You know, I don't maybe they can't see. Maybe they can't see that. What I'm saying is maybe they don't get how important those gray gloves were. Maybe they think, oh, the Undertaker shows up. Well, look, it's the old school dead man. He just arrived, and they don't get what that garb meant to us.
I don't think they have the brain space to add those specific
And that's
details.
what I mean about the bubble. They're too deep in it.
They're too deep in it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the brain space. They're, okay, we solved this. Let's go to the next match. What do we got to do there?
But
what do we got to do the next match?
Also, the question is Monday morning quarterback. Had they, like I was joking before, Bruce Pritchard's a huge fan of my show. Had he brought me in and said, Josh, you're a creative mind that needs to put the finishing touches on this. I don't know. Maybe if I'm sitting there in the midst of it and we're going through everything, maybe I'm not having that thought of this is how it should end, because maybe I can only see that because I am piggybacking off of what they created. And maybe it's not fair of me to say they should have done this.
I think that's what they need. I think they need a creative consultant that they hire to come in after they create all this and go, okay, take a look at this, and they put that finishing touch.
But
adjustment.
Here's a problem, though. They have that, and it's Vince McMahon who puts the finishing touch on everything there. But here's the problem. Try convincing them, and I'm tongue-in-cheek saying, me. Why are they going, well, wait a minute, we got Vince McMahon looking over this. We got Bruce Pritchard looking over this. We have Stephanie. We have Triple H. We're hiring Josh Shernoff to come in to give an opinion. We're hiring, forget Josh Shernoff. We're hiring Tony Khan.
Right.
Why?
It's they just have to find somebody
that has
deep
what I'm saying is,
of the business.
But what I'm saying is, why are they ever going to think that there's someone when they've got Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard and Triple H and Stephanie? Why are they ever going to think? We need to go outside this group.
You might be right. You made a good point, I think, about that it's easy to look at the finished product, or especially for somebody outside to look at the finished product and see ways to make it better rather than starting from scratch. And that's so commonplace in TV and movies that. I mean, there's probably countless examples. The first one that comes to mind, just as a random example, Little Shop of Horrors. When they made that movie, it ended with the plants, a bunch of the giant plants storming through. There you go, storming through like New York or something, like eating things and blowing stuff up and whatever. And it says and the plants killed all of humanity or whatever. And that was the
based off of the play.
That's off the play. And they screened it in front of an audience who said, this is awful. This is not how we want this to end. And they changed it and ended with a happy ending. Spoiler alert. And I think that's happened many times. So there is something to be said for that it's almost you have to go through all that work and all that expense and all that time to create a product for then people to look at it.
And that's where it becomes challenging, and we'll wrap things up here, but that's where it becomes challenging because unlike Little Shop of Horrors, who put this together, made this whole film, and now we're at the stage of, what do you think? Well, WWE doesn't have that luxury.
Right.
Because they've got they can't do a show and then go, what do you think on that specific thing? Could they have done that with the Boneyard match? Yeah, they could have. Honestly, they could have recorded that 6 weeks earlier. There was no reason why it had to be the night before. But so they could on some things, but it's tough. It's a different type of entertainment. It is an on-the-fly entertainment, product. But I think what it comes down to is I think what we looked at here was we spent 45 minutes talking about how terrible it is. But then we spent a lot of time talking about how great it can be and still can be. And I think the question it all comes down to as it relates to the WWE currently is, do they care if it is? Or are they satisfied churning out a wrestling show that their sponsors feel is acceptable and that they're...
Well, what's the incentive, right? Who are you trying to please? The sponsors?
Right.
Or the viewers,
And
what's more important?
What will it take? What number, as they continue to make more and more and more and more money, what number in the ratings is it going to take for them to change? Do they have to drop below 1 million? Do they have to get down to 200,000? Do they have to get to the 100,000 that impacts that? What is it going to take? Because right now, we understand WCW went out of business for reasons that had nothing to do with their product. Their product was not good, but their viewership was way better than WWE's right now from a number standpoint. And I understand it's not really apples to apples. It's a very different time now. You can absorb that content in different ways and blah, 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 and whatever. But more people were watching WCW than are watching WWE right now. I believe in the U.S. We'll say, as Dennis Miller would say, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but yeah, I think on that note, maybe we should wrap some things up. Any final thoughts on this discussion of the WWE, Fred?
No, I think obviously we'd like to see them succeed. I'd like to see it succeed in a way that creates a product that resembles what I grew up loving about the WWF. I think they have the potential. They obviously have access to the star power to make it happen. They've got the right creative minds. They just need to look at it from the perspective of the fan base that I think they should be trying to target. And it's a question of whether they have any incentive to do that.
Calvin Tan, final thoughts?
Yeah, I really like the idea of another show that's specific for kids because I think that they do have a lot of wrestlers that would be really great on a show like that. That right now, their character isn't really picking up steam because it's just not working for the audience. But for a kid's audience, it would be perfect for them, and I think they would thrive in something like that. So, I would love to see that happen.
We'll see.
Who knows? Yeah, we'll see. But success is also depends on what perspective you're looking at. What success is, right? Are you okay bringing in almost $1 billion in revenue and having what's perceived as an okay product, or what's perceived as a great product but less revenue?
To quote
as someone in a business,
To paraphrase Justin Timberlake in The Social Network, what's better than $1 billion? $2 billion. So there's that. Hey, we're making all this money, but man, could you imagine if the product was universally considered good? What kind of money could we be making, right? Matt Mangol, final thoughts?
I agree that they should have different, quote unquote, shows or brands. One targeting kids. I mean, or at least some TV for kids. Because the thing is, how do kids learn about the business, right? We learn by watching Mania, Superstars, Wrestling Spotlight, whenever that was on TV 48, and they would. just raw the way it was not. See, the biggest thing they're doing wrong is overproducing.
Yes.
Save a lot of that money, more profit. On something like the kids version, whatever that is, you can also use that as a proving ground for people to take on characters to see if they can cut the character thing or not. Then we move up to a different one another time. But the thing is, they're overproducing it. Save that time, save the energy. Bullet point all the promos. Make sure you hit this thing at the end. This is the beginning. Here's what we got to hit. That's what your performance center is for. If people need work, send them down in between shows. Put more of the energy into not missing things, right? Underproduce purposefully, okay? Then it would be better. My idea there. But I think they're doing some things right in the sense of obviously making money. They're not, they have never, even when they were in the Attitude, they never went over hardcore. Okay. Mm-hmm. What problem? We'll get into this next week, but AEW. Okay. Well, I'm going to go into the weeds here. I'm not going to. We'll save it for next time.
We'll save it for next time.
But the thing is, where do you go? You've taken 5 years worth of stuff and types of matches and shock value, and you've put it into like 6 months. Now what? So the thing is, I think they're overcompensating when they don't need to.
AEW.
Yes. They're overcompensating by doing too much other stuff. And at some point, it's going to bite them in the ass in some fashion. But they're just over. So overproduction over here, overcompensation over here. It's interesting. Now, who's to say another company, AEW, or somebody else, doesn't come up with a kids brand? So what made WWE change things up back in the day was competition, but not competition doing the same thing. Competition specifically doing things new, different, their own version, Nitro and the way they shot things, and them all of a sudden going, wait, we need to change things up. If they don't have that, they're never going to do it. So, and they don't have to because they're making money. So that's my thought. PT Unlocked at PT Unlocked on Instagram, we changed that up a little bit, and at PT Unlocked on Twitter. Feel free to slide on into the DMs there. Just be careful. And, what are you going to do? PersonalTrainingUnlocked.com for the Patreon.
We thank them so much for sponsoring.
Yeah,
Talking to friends. My final thought on this, and I wrote down a note here for, because I believe this is episode 10, if I'm not mistaken.
10.0?
Yeah. Hey, NXT has had more versions than the TWF did, which is not more virgins.
Virgil? Wait, Virgil? Didn't Virgil spit in Calvin's mouth?
No, Virgil didn't spit in Calvin's mouth, but he is a close talker, and I'm gonna show that right now on the screen. So there he is talking to Calvin Tam. But anyway, I made a note because you said something, Mangol, that made me think this could be a fun topic for episode 12. Because next month we're going to talk about the state of AEW, what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. I think we stumbled inadvertently into a really cool topic. But I put for episode 12 promos, because you said something about bullet points, and there are a lot of arguments for them and a lot of arguments against them. And I think that we could have a really good conversation about promos, past and present, and what makes them good and what makes them terrible. Yeah. So I'm excited for where things are headed with this new season, this new version of TWF 5.0. Whatever, I don't. But no, I'm really excited about this. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk about this, and thank you all for tuning in here on Fight.tv or over where you get your podcast by downloading the So Says Shernoff podcast feed. I hope that you will join us over on social media at the TWF Show. Check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/so says Shernoff. And do me a favor. Hey, if you want to hop on and check this out early, you can watch this before everybody else over at patreon.com/so says Shernoff. So check that out. Also, some great TWF merchandise over at so-says-shernoff.com. If you haven't figured it out, So Says Shernoff presents Talking with Friends. So all that stuff's over there. Check it out. And of course, personal training unlocked as well. Go check that out. What are you doing? Yeah, I guess that's it. For Fred Shernoff, for Calvin Tan, for Matt Mangol, I'm Josh Shernoff, and we will see you the next time we get together here on Talking with Friends on Fight.
Payback, Mr. Tybor. Mr. Tybor. Mr. Tybor. Find a piggy bank. Lather it up with maple syrup. Shove it up your Labatt keister. Hey!